Hello and welcome to the Very Audible Stories. In today's videos, it would be a stories about a hidden kindness coming from a mafia bosses whom everyone feared. If you like these videos, please share your thoughts on the comment sections and subscribe to the channel to receive notifications about new videos. Thank you.
A single bowl of chicken soup bought her a front row seat to the deadliest crime syndicate in Chicago. She thought she was simply saving a confused old man from the freezing November rain. She had no idea the frail hands she warmed belonged to the father of the city's most ruthless mafia boss. The neon sign of Rudy's all-night diner in Logan Square flickered with a tired, buzzing hum, casting a sickly red glow over the rain-slicked pavement. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, and the relentless Chicago downpour felt like ice against the glass. Haley Jenkins wiped down the laminate counter for the fourth time, her shoulders aching with the heavy, familiar weight of exhaustion. At 22, she was already drowning. Between double shifts at the diner and the suffocating medical bills from Rush University Medical Center for her younger sister's cystic fibrosis treatments, Haley's life was a masterclass in survival. She untied her stained apron, desperate for the meager warmth of her cramped studio apartment. As she pushed through the diner's glass doors and stepped into the bitter wind, a faint sound caught her attention. It wasn't the usual screech of an L train or the wail of a distant siren. It was a low, ragged cough coming from the mouth of the alley adjacent to the diner. Haley hesitated. Instinct told her to keep her head down and walk fast. This wasn't a neighborhood where you investigated shadows. But a second cough, weaker this time, anchored her feet to the pavement. Pulling her thin thrift store coat tighter around her, she stepped cautiously toward the darkness. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling over the sound of the rain. Huddled against the damp brick wall was a man. He wasn't a vagrant, though he was soaked to the bone. Even in the dim light, Haley could tell the wool suit he wore was impeccably tailored, ruined as it was by the mud and water. He had shock-white hair plastered to his forehead and was clutching a soggy, torn photograph to his chest. He was shivering violently, his pale lips tinged with a dangerous shade of blue. "Sir?" Haley knelt beside him, the icy water seeping instantly through her worn jeans. "Sir, you're freezing. Where is your coat? Where is your family?" The old man looked up. His eyes, a striking, piercing shade of steel gray, were clouded with confusion. "I was looking for Mary's bakery," he mumbled, his jaw trembling. "I promised Mary I'd bring home the cannoli. But the streets, they changed the streets on me." Haley's heart broke. There hadn't been a bakery on this block in over a decade. The man was profoundly lost, caught in the cruel grip of a memory that no longer matched reality. She glanced at his wrist and noticed a heavy, silver Patek Philippe watch peeking out from his soaked cuff. He was wealthy, which made his presence in this dangerous alley even more baffling. "Okay, let's get you out of the rain," Haley said softly. She didn't have a phone with minutes left to call the police, and leaving him here to wait for an ambulance in the freezing downpour felt like a death sentence. Her apartment was only 2 blocks away. Hooking her arms under his shoulders, she hoisted him up. He was surprisingly heavy, broad-shouldered despite his frailty. "I'm Haley," she said, guiding his stumbling feet. "What's your name?" "Arthur," he rasped, leaning heavily against her. "I shouldn't have left the house. My boy, Gabriel, he worries. He works so hard in the import business. So much stress." "Well, Arthur, we're going to get you dry, and then we'll figure out how to call Gabriel," Haley reassured him. The walk to her apartment was agonizing, but they finally made it up the 3 flights of stairs to her tiny, drafty unit. Haley immediately grabbed her only thick blanket, a faded quilt her mother had made, and wrapped it around Arthur's shaking frame. She turned on the stove to heat up a can of chicken noodle soup, the only food she had left in her cupboard until payday. As Arthur slowly thawed, the fog in his eyes seemed to lift slightly. He ate the soup with a quiet dignity, his sharp gaze taking in the peeling wallpaper, the stack of past-due bills on the tiny table, and the framed photo of Haley and her sister, Lily. "You have a kind heart, Haley. Arthur said, his voice stronger now, carrying a gravelly, authoritative timbre that seemed at odds with the confused old man in the alley. Kindness is a rare currency in this city. People usually look away. I couldn't look away, Haley replied, handing him a mug of hot tea. You are freezing. Arthur nodded slowly. Gabriel will want to thank you. He doesn't like to owe debts. It's just soup, Arthur, no debt. Haley offered a tired smile. She let him sleep on her pull-out sofa while she sat in the armchair, drifting into a restless slumber. When the morning light broke through the grimy window, Haley woke with a start. The sofa was empty. The quilt was neatly folded. Panic flared in her chest had he wandered back out into the cold. She rushed to the window and looked down at the street. Idling perfectly in front of her dilapidated building was a sleek, armor-plated black Lincoln Navigator. Two men, built like brick walls and wearing sharp dark suits, stood flanking the doors. As Haley watched, wide-eyed, the rear door closed. The men got in, and the SUV glided away silently, blending into the morning traffic. Haley let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She walked over to the small kitchen table. Resting perfectly in the center of a past-due electric bill was a solid gold money clip, heavy and cold to the touch, embossed with a single elegant letter, M. 2 days passed, and the surreal memory of Arthur and the black SUV began to fade, buried under the crushing avalanche of Haley's reality. The hospital had called. If she didn't provide a $5,000 installment for Lily's upcoming respiratory therapy by Friday, they would have to halt the specialized treatments. Haley was terrified. She had pawned the gold money clip Arthur left behind, but the pawn shop owner, taking one terrified look at the M crest, refused to touch it, whispering that it was cursed money. It was a Thursday afternoon, and Haley was back at Rudy's diner, aggressively scrubbing a skillet in the back kitchen to hide her tears. The bell above the front door chimed, but Haley didn't look up until she heard the diner grow deathly quiet. She wiped her hands and pushed through the swinging kitchen doors. Standing in the center of the diner were two men. They were impeccably dressed in dark suits, exuding a quiet, lethal menace that made the regular patrons freeze over their coffee cups. One of them, a man with a jagged scar cutting through his left eyebrow, locked eyes with Haley. "Haley Jenkins?" he asked. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried across the room like a gunshot. "Yes," Haley answered, her heart hammering against her ribs. "My employer would like a word. Please come with us." It wasn't a request. "I'm working," she managed to stammer, wiping her hands on her apron. "I can't just leave." The scarred man reached into his jacket, pulling out a thick stack of $100 bills, and dropped it onto the counter next to a terrified Rudy. "Her shift is covered. Let's go, Miss Jenkins." Fear, cold and sharp, coiled in her stomach, but she knew better than to resist men who carried themselves like this. She took off her apron and followed them out to a waiting black sedan. The drive was silent. They left the gritty streets of Logan Square, heading north toward the Gold Coast, pulling into the private, gated driveway of a massive stone estate overlooking Lake Michigan. Haley was escorted through heavy oak doors into a sprawling foyer adorned with marble and dark wood. She was led down a long hallway and ushered into a vast, dimly lit library. The scent of old paper, rich leather, and expensive cigar smoke hung heavy in the air. Sitting behind a massive mahogany desk was a man who stole the air from the room. He was in his early 30s, with dark, swept-back hair and a custom-tailored charcoal suit that hugged a muscular, predatory frame. But it was his eyes that made Haley freeze. They were the exact same piercing, steel gray as Arthur's, but where Arthur's had been clouded with confusion, this man's eyes were razor-sharp, calculating, and utterly merciless. This was Gabriel Moretti, the undisputed head of the Moretti crime family, a man whose name was whispered with dread in the darkest corners of Chicago's underworld. "Sit," Gabriel commanded, his voice a low, smooth baritone. Haley mechanically moved to the leather wingback chair opposite his desk, her knees shaking. Gabriel leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk, steepling his fingers. He studied her for a long, agonizing moment. "2 nights ago, my father walked out of this secure estate because a guard fell asleep on his watch. He wandered for 5 miles in a freezing storm. Gabriel's voice tightened, a flicker of raw emotion bleeding through the ice. I tore this city apart, looking for him. Men bled to give me answers. And then he just comes home, driven by one of my patrols, who found him walking out of your building. Haley swallowed hard. He was lost. He was looking for a bakery. Gabriel's eyes narrowed into terrifying slits. My father suffers from Lewy body dementia. He has moments of absolute clarity and moments where he thinks it's 1,995. Now, here is my problem, Miss Jenkins. In my world, there are no coincidences. Women like you do not simply stumble upon men like my father, take them in, and ask for nothing. He stood up, slowly walking around the desk until he was towering over her. So, tell me, who told you to grab him? Was it the Russo family? Were you trying to leverage him for a ransom? Haley's fear suddenly evaporated, replaced by a flare of indignant anger. Leverage him? She snapped, standing up to meet his gaze, though she only came up to his chest. I found an old man freezing to death in an alley while your so-called secure guards were sleeping. I didn't know who he was, and frankly, I don't care about your family rivalries. I gave him soup and my only blanket because it was the human thing to do. If you want to shoot me for that, go ahead, but don't accuse me of being a monster when I was cleaning up your mess. The silence in the room was deafening. The two guards by the door tensed, their hands hovering over their jackets. No one spoke to Gabriel Moretti like that. No one lived to speak to him like that. Gabriel stared down at her, his expression unreadable. For a second, a muscle feathered in his jaw. Then, shockingly, the corner of his mouth twitched upward into a ghost of a smirk. He turned away, walking back to his desk. He picked up a sleek black folder and tossed it onto the mahogany surface. Haley Jenkins, 22, works 60 hours a week at Rudy's. Parents deceased in a car accident 5 years ago. Sole guardian of Lily Jenkins, who is currently being treated for cystic fibrosis at Rush University. He looked up, his gray eyes locking onto hers, the hostility replaced by intense scrutiny. You need $5,000 by tomorrow, or your sister loses her care. Haley felt the blood drain from her face. How do you know that? I know everything, Gabriel said softly. My father hasn't stopped talking about the angel with the soup since he got back. He refuses to let his current nurses near him. He threw a vase at the last one. Gabriel sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose, suddenly looking exhausted. I am a man who repays his debts. You saved my father's life. I owe you. I don't want Mafia money, Haley said, her voice trembling slightly. It's not a gift, Gabriel countered, his tone turning strictly business. It's an employment offer. I need someone my father trusts to live here and manage his care. Your sister's medical bills will be paid in full, permanently. You will have a private suite in this house. You will be paid a weekly salary that dwarfs whatever you make, scrubbing plates at that diner. Haley stared at him, her mind reeling. Move into the fortress of a mafia boss? It was insane. It was dangerous. But the image of Lily, struggling to breathe in a sterile hospital room, flashed in her mind. What's the catch? She asked, her voice a whisper. Gabriel leaned over the desk, his presence overwhelming, smelling of expensive cologne and danger. The catch, Miss Jenkins, is that once you enter this house, you see nothing, you hear nothing, and you belong to the Moretti family. You do not leave without my permission. Do we have a deal? The transition from the drafty, mold-scented studio in Logan Square to the sprawling Moretti estate on the Gold Coast was nothing short of a violent system shock for Haley. Her new room was a master suite the size of her entire former apartment building's floor, featuring vaulted ceilings, a massive 4-poster bed, and a balcony overlooking the steel-gray expanse of Lake Michigan. True to his word, Gabriel Moretti had moved swiftly. Within 24 hours of their deal, Lily was transferred to a private, VIP respiratory wing at Rush University Medical Center, her suffocating debt erased with a single wire transfer from a shell corporation. But the luxury came with a suffocating weight. The estate was a fortress. Men with cold eyes and bulging jackets patrolled the manicured gardens. Security cameras tracked every movement in the hallways. Haley quickly realized she had traded poverty for a gilded cage. Her primary focus, however, was Arthur. The old man was a tempest of fragmented memories and startling lucidity. When the Lewy body dementia gripped him, he would wander the halls looking for his late wife, Isabella, speaking to shadows and crying out for a past that was long buried. During these dark hours, Haley was his anchor. She didn't coddle him. She spoke to him with the same firm, gentle respect she had used in the alley. She learned to redirect his panic, playing old Sinatra records to soothe his tremors and sitting with him in the estate's sunroom, reading aloud from historical biographies. It was during Arthur's lucid moments that Haley began to understand the terrifying man who ruled this house. "He wasn't always made of stone, you know," Arthur murmured one rainy Tuesday afternoon, his sharp gray eyes watching the raindrops race down the bulletproof glass. He was nursing a cup of chamomile tea Haley had brewed. Gabriel, he wanted to be an architect. He used to build these magnificent cities out of wooden blocks right there on the rug, Arthur's voice cracked. But in our world, sons do not get to choose their inheritance. When Isabella was taken from us, a car bomb meant for me, Gabriel was only 19. He saw the flames. He pulled my burning body from the wreckage. The architect died that day. The boss was born. Haley felt a sudden, sharp ache in her chest. She looked toward the heavy mahogany doors of the library, where Gabriel spent hours orchestrating a criminal empire. She had spent the last 3 weeks trying to avoid him. Their interactions had been brief, restricted to nods in the hallway or terse updates on Arthur's health. He was always cold, impeccably dressed, and radiating a dangerous, untouchable authority. But that night, the fragile barrier between them cracked. Unable to sleep, Haley wandered down to the massive, state-of-the-art kitchen to warm some milk. The house was dead silent, the guards relegated to the perimeter. As she turned the corner, she froze. Gabriel was sitting at the marble island, his suit jacket discarded, his tie loosened. A half-empty bottle of amber scotch sat before him. But what stopped Haley was the sight of his hands. He was pressing a bloody towel to his left forearm, his face pale and drawn tight with pain. "What happened?" Haley gasped, rushing forward before common sense could stop her. Gabriel's head snapped up, his hand instantly flying to the holster at his hip before he registered it was her. He relaxed marginally, but his eyes were hard. "Go back to your room, Haley. You aren't supposed to see this. You're bleeding through the towel." She ignored his command, dropping her mug and moving to the sink. She knew where the first aid supplies were kept from her time tending to Arthur's minor scrapes. She grabbed the heavy white box and slammed it onto the island next to his scotch. "Move your hand," I said. "Go upstairs," he growled, a warning vibrating in his chest. "I am not one of your strays." "No, you're just a stubborn man bleeding out on Italian marble," she shot back, her anxiety turning into fiery defiance. "Move the towel, Gabriel, or I'll call one of your terrifying gorillas in here to do it for me." For a long second, he stared at her. The air between them crackled with a sudden, suffocating tension. No one gave Gabriel Moretti orders. Yet, slowly, he lifted the towel. A deep, jagged slice tore across his forearm, a knife wound. Haley swallowed the bile in her throat. Her hands shook slightly as she poured antiseptic over the wound, but she didn't look away. As she meticulously stitched the cut, using skills she'd learned from years of patching up her own minor injuries to avoid hospital bills, she felt Gabriel's heavy gaze on her. "Dominic Costa," Gabriel suddenly said, his voice a low, raspy whisper in the quiet kitchen. "A rival from the south side. He's making a play for the ports. One of his men got lucky tonight during a negotiation." "Why are you telling me this?" Haley asked, keeping her eyes fixed on the needle. "You told me to see nothing and hear nothing." "Because you're too smart to be blind, Haley," he replied softly. He reached out with his uninjured hand, gently catching her chin and tilting her face up to meet his gaze. The touch sent a jolt of electricity straight to her core. His thumb brushed against her lower lip. "You care for my father as if he were your own. You look at me without flinching, even when you know what I am. I'm telling you this because the Costas are ruthless, and you have become a fixture in this house." He didn't say the word weakness, but she heard it loud and clear. "I can take care of myself," she whispered, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs as she stared into those storm-gray eyes. "Not in my world," Gabriel murmured, slowly dropping his hand, though the heat of his touch lingered on her skin. "From now on, Silas goes with you everywhere, even to the hospital to see Lily. No exceptions." Haley wanted to argue, but the raw, protective intensity in his eyes silenced her. She finished bandaging his arm, the air thick with unspoken words. As she turned to leave, Gabriel's voice stopped her. "Haley," she looked back. "Thank you," the Mafia boss said, and for the first time, the mask slipped entirely, revealing a deeply exhausted, lonely man underneath. Over the next month, the atmosphere in the city shifted. Even sequestered in the estate, Haley could feel the brewing war. Arthur was moved to a secure bunker-like suite on the ground floor. Silas, a towering mountain of a man with a surprisingly gentle demeanor, became Haley's shadow. But the most significant shift was between Haley and Gabriel. The cold avoidance melted into a magnetic, dangerous pull. He began joining her and Arthur for dinner. He would seek her out in the library late at night, asking about her day, listening intently as she talked about Lily's progress. Haley found herself looking forward to the sound of his heavy footsteps. She was falling for a monster, a man who ordered violence with a wave of his hand, yet who would carefully peel an apple for his dying father and look at her as if she were the only light in his dark, violent world. She was living on borrowed time, completely unaware that Dominic Costa had finally figured out exactly how to break Gabriel Moretti. 3 months after bringing Arthur home, the trap was sprung. Haley had just finished visiting Lily at Rush University Medical Center. The experimental treatments were working miracles, and Haley felt lighter than she had in years. But as she and her towering bodyguard, Silas, stepped out into the biting November wind toward their armored SUV, screeching tires shattered the afternoon peace. 2 unmarked gray vans violently boxed them in. Men in ski masks, armed with automatic weapons, poured out. "Get down!" Silas roared, violently shoving Haley behind a concrete planter just as bullets shattered the SUV's glass. Pedestrians screamed and scattered. Silas returned fire with lethal precision, dropping 2 masked men instantly. "They're Costa's men," he yelled into his radio over the deafening noise. "Boss, we are pinned down at the hospital." Code red. Haley curled into a tight ball, terror seizing her throat as concrete dusted her hair. She closed her eyes tight, praying for Lily, for Arthur, for a miracle. Suddenly, a deafening roar cut through the gunfire. 2 heavily armored Cadillac Escalades smashed through the hospital gates, jumping the curb and ramming directly into the gray vans with a sickening crunch. Gabriel emerged. He didn't look like the man who quietly drank tea in the sunroom. Dressed in a black tactical vest and wielding a suppressed rifle, Gabriel moved with a terrifying, fluid lethality. His men flooded the street, overwhelming the Costa hitmen in seconds. When the gunfire finally ceased, Gabriel dropped his weapon and sprinted toward the concrete planter. "Haley!" he shouted, sliding to his knees. He grabbed her shoulders, his steel-gray eyes wild with panic as he frantically checked her for blood. "Are you hit?" "I'm okay," she sobbed, throwing her arms around his neck. Gabriel crushed her to him, his heart pounding against her cheek like a jackhammer. "I've got you," he whispered fiercely. "Silas, get her in the car." Now, back at the estate, the compound went into full lockdown. Gabriel escorted Haley straight to his private office, locking the heavy mahogany doors. He paced the room, running his hands through his dark hair, his breathing ragged. "They almost took you," he muttered. The sheer terror in his eyes revealed a vulnerability she had never thought to see in the ruthless Mafia boss. "Costa knew you were my blind spot." "I'm fine, Gabriel," Haley said, stepping toward him. Seeing the blood on his cuffs, she didn't feel repulsed. She felt safe. "You saved me." "I brought this on you!" he exploded, grabbing her face gently, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "I tried to treat you like an employee, but every time I look at you, Haley, you tear down another piece of my armor. I am a monster. My world is blood and death, but I love you. I love you so much it's driving me insane, and today it almost got you killed." Haley covered his rough hands with her own. "You are not a monster to me. You saved my sister. You gave your father his dignity back. I don't want to run from your world, Gabriel. I want to stand beside you." Gabriel groaned, a sound of absolute surrender, and crashed his lips down onto hers. The kiss was desperate and bruising a vow sealed in the shadows of a mafia war. Over the next week, the Chicago underworld shifted. Gabriel unleashed a surgical strike against the Costa family, permanently neutralizing the threat. The message was clear. Anyone who looked at Haley Jenkins would face the ungodly wrath of the Moretti Syndicate. A year later, the sprawling gardens of the estate were bathed in spring light. Arthur, seated in a custom wheelchair, watched with a lucid smile as a healthy Lily chased a puppy across the lawn. Haley stood on the stone terrace, a delicate diamond ring sparkling on her left hand. She leaned back against Gabriel's solid chest, his arms wrapped securely around her waist. "She looks happy," Gabriel murmured. "We all are," Haley replied, pressing a soft kiss to his jaw. The poor girl from Logan Square had saved a lost old man with a bowl of soup, unaware she was walking into a deadly crime syndicate. But she hadn't just survived the lion's den, she had tamed the lion. Haley was now the heart of the Moretti family. What a breathtaking journey. From a freezing alleyway to the heavily guarded walls of a mafia empire, Haley proved that kindness is the ultimate power. If you loved the thrilling twists and the passionate romance between Haley and Gabriel, hit that like button, share this story with your friends, and make sure to subscribe for more incredible real-life dramas.